Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Sanders, Group Publisher of Food News Media, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar in which we will be looking more closely at the Annual QSR Drive-Thru Study specifically and drive-thru best practices more generally. Now, we have a lot of information coming your way in the next 45 minutes or so let's dive right in. But first, one housekeeping note. Please note that we will be taking questions from the audience. So at any point when you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A functionality on the webinar console. We're going to reserve time at the end of the program for questions, but we do encourage you to submit questions as they occur to you. So on with the show. We have with us today Ken Lundin from SeeLevel HX, who will take a look at some of the most important results and lessons of the most recent QSR drive-thru study, and Sam Oches, editor of QSR Magazine and also the editorial director of Food News Media, who will share some of the information he's gleaned from operators about how they're addressing the most pressing challenges of the drive-thru business. So let's get started. We'll turn the program over to Ken Lundin from SeeLevel HX, the firm that conducted the research for the study. Ken, welcome, and please take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Well, I guess let me start off by saying this is a fantastic year and I think an important study. We've done this now for 18 years and absolutely value our relationship with QSR Magazine and with Food News Media in general. So it's awesome that we get a chance to come together and talk this through, because the only thing that I'm completely sure of today based upon the study results and our conversations with operators are things seem to continue to change. So today, let me set up what today is going to be and what today is not going to be. So today we're going to go through and we're going to review some of the high-level results of this, some of the business implications going forward, and the types of questions that specific operators may be asking themselves or may need to ask in order to compete in this highly competitive space. What it won't be is just a dry reiteration of the data itself. Now, the survey is available for people. The presentation is as well. But currently today, let's get into the stuff that really, really matters as you operate each of your QSR locations. So first, let's kind of jump in here. You know, one of the things that we've always looked at traditionally, the nice thing about having a study that's in flight for 18 years is that we get to see some data and see how it changes over time. One of the things that we've always thought and we've always looked at from the QSR industry perspective is, you know, total times matter when it comes to gathering market share, when it comes to customer satisfaction and loyalty. So let's take a quick look at kind of what this looks like across the top 10 brands, which we surveyed throughout 2018 for the study. So first, as you can see, the average total time just looked like it was under about 300 seconds, but I would draw your attention to the idea of the difference between wait time and service time. We'll come back to that. You can see in total time, Chick-fil-A looks like it was the slowest, and you'll see that Burger King looks the fastest. As you start to normalize some of that data, and you start to see that maybe customers are looking more at what service time looks like, and maybe they're a little okay with wait time. But we'll talk more about that as we kind of slide through some of the data. We talk about the other thing we want to look at when we start talking about total times for a car is, you know, what's the wait plus the service? And what's the average total of time on a per car basis as we push through? Now, the reason we kind of put this in and counter it with the previous slide is that we want to have a discussion about what's the actual time on a per car basis. And so you'll see the results tend to skew themselves and tend to change pretty significantly when we see that Chick-fil-A actually becomes the fastest as opposed to being the slowest in the previous slide. There's the ability when we go through and in the actual study and the study results themselves, you can see this data all the way down to a per location basis for each of the brands that we surveyed. But I know that we wanted to get into this, and the reason we wanted to talk about the total times really comes down to a simple fact. How does it affect your market share? How does it affect the business implications and the business problems that each of you have to solve in order to continue to grow? So I like trending data, and at SeeLevel HX, the nice thing about this 18-year study is we see trending data. So as you look here, you'll see total times per brand, but this is the trend. And you'll see there are some consistencies and inconsistencies. There are certainly brands that have put an emphasis on improving service times. There are brands who have not done so well with service times. And I want to draw your attention to where you see the red circle. Now understand that these are my opinions, and these are just things that we notice and we go around as we try to solve business problems for the QSR operators and brands that we serve. But you'll see the three brands that I circled, a Wendy's, Taco Bell, and McDonald's specifically, you'll see that in 2018, their actual total times skyrocketed versus what they'd been in previous years. You'll see that many of the other brands showed consistent times. So I point this out just because we want to talk about the potential business implications. And the question becomes, are we solving the right business problems when we go out and do the research on our customers and determine what it is that we can do to differentiate ourselves in the market? I know that all of you see when you go and you watch the press, it's heavily coveted and it's heavily looked at that, we are looking at, there's pricing pressure, there's a saturation issue. There are some other things that are happening that are making the environment incredibly tough. So I would just pose a question for your consideration. Do those things really matter, and are they the things you should be looking at? And the reason that I circled the Wendy's talk about McDonald's, because there was such a gap between how they performed last year and how those total times stacked up this year, is as follows. It's publicly reported Taco Bell missed the expectations for same-store growth in August 2018 of 2% versus 2.7%. Right? Wendy's same-store sales fell by 0.2%. And then when you look at McDonald's, you'll see that most of their same-store sales growth has been in the global markets, and the U.S. missed on expectations in one of the most recent quarters. So I just pose, is the question really that we need to be faster or slower, or is the question that we need to be consistent? And what are we doing when we research, and what are the business implications for how we grow same-store sales? Look at some of the other brands who have been consistent in their times and certainly not fast, which the old adage was we just had to be fast and accurate to get brand loyalty. You can look at Chick-fil-A. Very, very consistent from a total times perspective, and same-store sales is killing it, right? Projected potentially to go from the 9th largest QSR to the 3rd largest QSR by the end of 2019. So when we think about this from a pure business perspective, as you go out and do the research and figure out where to make an impact, you may want to consider, are you actually asking and answering the right questions? Because if I ask the wrong question, the answer is almost irrelevant. So as we look, I wanted to go through quickly, talk about it. I know that as we look at the actual times that we have across lunch and dinner, et cetera, we want to make sure and see where the disparities might occur. You'll see that this chart for lunchtime shows the same data, the same trending data that we saw in the earlier slide. You'll see that the brands who tended to get slower or significantly different from last year had this happen across lunch, and then you'll see the other brands that were consistent continue to have that happen as well. Now, the interesting thing here is you saw where the disparities ended, right, and the differences. And so when we had talked specifically, and I want to throw credit to the brands that we just spoke about, because McDonald's and Wendy's, as you can see here at dinner time, the trend wasn't significantly different. At lunchtime seems to be where things get pretty slow. And then I also call out on this slide, if you'll look at what Chick-fil-A has done in terms of this study. They significantly improved their actual times going through from a dinner perspective, able to push more throughput for, which we'll show later, actually, as everybody knows, converts into specific dollars for each location. And I think one of the things when we looked at it, we talked about this as an executive management team at SeeLevel, and I know that when we spoke with it about our friends at QSR Magazine, one of the things that we found pretty interesting this year was order accuracy. Because order accuracy has implications across all sorts of fronts, whether it hits brand loyalty, whether it actually hits throughput, whether it slows or speeds up service times. And so if you can see here when we talk about the order accuracy in 2018 versus 2017, there's been a pretty dramatic change. When you think about it, at dinner time there was only an 80% order accuracy, right? Meaning 1 in 5 orders was inaccurate for some reason. Now we think about those things, we say, there are business implications for that. But really what it comes down to is there are actual gross margin and sales implications that come from inaccuracies that are happening. And what we found in looking at the study is many times this just came down to best practices. This could come down to the idea that the best practices that you may roll out at a corporate level may not be making it all the way to your individual store locations. Are they missing things? Is it the main item? Is it the drink? Is it a special order? Is it no ice? Is it the ability just to pay attention to the details of what a customer is asking for? You get a few chances when it comes down to this, and we want to make sure that you have the ability to keep customers loyal. But you can see the study results changed pretty significantly in 2018 versus 2017. And this is something we want to be aware of, the business implications that follow this. So let's look a little bit deeper in it. As we talked about, we know that there are financial ramifications, but what are those financial ramifications? So here's where they come. There's a couple of things that if you really extrapolate this, that can show you what the money is that could be lost on a per location basis. If you look at our service time for accurate orders at just under 294 seconds, the service time for inaccurate orders at just under 326 seconds, that's losing a half a minute to inaccurate orders. If we push that through and assume what that means from a daily lost transactions, it's almost 22 transactions, which leads up to just under 8,000 transactions over the course of a year, and could lead to up to 51,000 in yearly lost revenue. So these are the things we have to be aware of, because whether it comes down to your actual throughput, your order accuracy, all these things that are slowing down the throughput of your drive-thrus are absolutely impacting the operators from a brand loyalty and actual loss of revenue perspective. So as we go through, just think about that and think about how you might be able to change those ideas and figure out where is it that we might be inaccurate. So other things, what can we do to speed up throughput? And so one of the interesting things is, do digital menu boards even matter? Everybody who sells a digital menu board will tell you yes. So we tested for it, and we wanted to find out, does it actually help increase throughput? So with our digital menu boards, as you can see from this slide, the answer is yes, in the limited environment that they exist. So, of the just under 1,600 total shops that we did across the United States, only about 10% of them actually had a digital menu board. But with that 10%, what did it look like when it came down to the actual service times that we had to go through? Well, and here it was. You gained a half a minute. Went from 268 seconds to about 302 with a non-digital menu board. As you can see, it's a very similar loss of time and space, loss of throughput as order accuracy when it hits you. So 33 seconds gained with that. Not in widespread use, but at this point, they appear to potentially speed up service times. Suggestive selling is an interesting thing for me, because when we talk about it, I came up, and I won't mention the QSR, but it's one of the large QSRs, and I came up 25 years ago working at a QSR as a swing manager as I went through college. And I remember how incredibly important it was that we suggestive sell. And I know that when I actually drive through many of your drive-thrus and I go get a meal for myself or my family, I think it's probably one of the areas that's most missed. Now, the issue is many times people stop, the actual operator on the ground, the employee in the window may stop suggestive selling because guess what? The person said no, and they just don't want to hear no again. But this shows you the importance of suggestive selling just from a standpoint to help generate throughput in your drive-thru. Right? When a suggestive sale was offered, 280 seconds. When a suggestive sale was not offered, 308. You'll notice, and the trend that's interesting in the last 3 slides, is by implementing best practices, we're picking up about 30 seconds in service time. We'll show you as you go forward and as we forecast into today, we'll talk a little bit about what does the best of the best practices look like, and what could you potentially consider, how do you test, how do you market, how do you figure out the things that will actually help you perform better and gain more market share. So here it is, the winning combination. You look at all of the different things that we tested, and we tested over 30 combinations. What we found is that the winning combination was accuracy of orders plus the digital menu board plus suggestive selling, and the drive-through time was 102.6 seconds faster. So let me say that again. The drive-through time was 102.6 seconds faster. That's an amazing number when you start to talk about brand loyalty, when you start to talk about the ability to push throughput through, and the ability to actually have all the other stuff that goes wrong with slow service and inaccurate orders. When all those things are, man, I apologize, can't talk. When all those things tend to go sideways, this really is something that can help you gain market share. This year we wanted to do something different. We were mandated with it. We talked to QSR Magazine early on, and we said, well, what are we going to do different? What's innovative and new, and what's happening out there that's actually influencing the QSR market? So one of the things we want to talk about was innovation in ordering. We were pretty sure, just from a, hey, how is it being used, just talking about it behind the scenes before we actually launched the study, that we would find that, man, everybody's advertising and marketing that you can use the mobile phone or app, right, and that you can actually use that to come up, cut in line, get the things going, and we figured it would be prevalent across the United States, or at least I did. So the data here actually surprised me very significantly, because other than McDonald's, and Chick-fil-A and Dunkin' Donuts are doing a decent job, but other than McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, and Dunkin' Donuts, the promotion of mobile apps was still low. We weren't putting the time and the money and the things into making sure people understood. As an example, I can tell you in part of the study, what we found is people didn't necessarily see the signage, even if the signage was up. And then when we asked the follow-up question, which was, do they have parking for mobile apps? Oh, then we might have seen it. But it ended up being an afterthought instead of something that could actually help. Now, the other idea behind innovation in ordering is the operational challenges that it may place on each individual location, right? With a specific real estate footprint, with a specific way of doing things, you know, how do we make those operational challenges to actually take advantage of somebody pre-ordering something 5 or 10 minutes before they show up, push it through, and be able to actually increase our total volume without the constraints that are associated with what we have to do from an operational perspective. So as you can see here, this is one of the slides, I guess I foreshadowed into, the parking space for order pickup to delivery to car. And it shows you the gap that we tend to see. So as an example, once again, McDonald's appears the most likely to accommodate customers who order with a phone or an app, followed closely by Chick-fil-A, and then nobody else really tends to see it. So this is based upon all these shops as they went through each of these brands, looking for a parking space, looking for something that says, hey, we can pick up or get the delivery to our car. It looks like a potential area where there could be an absolute massive opportunity to separate yourself from the competition. All right, so everybody's super interested in this. So let's talk about who the leader of the study was. And when we looked at it, we took everything. We took accuracy, service, taste, speed, according to the shoppers who visited all of your brands, or all of the brands. What we found was that Arby's actually ranked in all 4 categories in the top 5. And so from that perspective, being second in accuracy, second in service, second in taste, fourth in speed, one of the areas where Arby's may be able to translate some things is how do we actually operationally improve the speed of service that we have in order to continue to position ourselves in the QSR realm. Second was Chick-fil-A. And Chick-fil-A, it's interesting because they placed first in 3 of the 4 categories and didn't place in the top 5 in speed at all. Which I think goes back to probably the earlier comments that I had on one of the very first slides. And that is speed of service the most important thing? Is it consistency? What is it that's the most important to our consumers today? Because their tastes are changing. The way that they view the world is changing. The other thing that you'll see with some brands, it's widely covered that many, many brands have been trying to worry about pricing. They've been worried about the commoditization of pricing and the pricing pressure being applied to them. There are brands like Chick-fil-A who have not entered into that discussion and have decided to hold true and deliver the experience that they want to deliver and have done very, very well. So I think what I take from this is the idea of whether or not is the world changing. Are the things that you and I used to think were true that had to actually work for the QSR industry in order to gain market share, do those things still exist in the same manner they did in the past? Or are we analyzing and looking at things that are not providing us actionable insights in order to influence the growth of our brands? We have to understand that as we go through the entire QSR and fast casual. What are the customer expectations? And do we know what they are, or are we assuming what they are? You know, interestingly enough, as we pull this through, when you look at it and tie this all together, the other thing that came out of this is, you know, Chick-fil-A, 72% said they'd recommend Chick-fil-A to friends and family. For the rest of the other 9 brands within the survey, the number was below 50%. I think that goes back to the point of, are the standards changing with which consumers are willing to engage with your brand? Are we measuring the right things? Are you testing the right things? Are you using the right hypothesis? And are you using the right data in order to make actionable recommendations to the business? So a few things that we can do here just real quickly. One of the things we want to talk about is if you want to drive through a pre-sale menu board to help speed things up, menu board optimization, we have some friends who do this very, very well, but menu board optimization is one place where you might have an actionable insight and help speed throughput up, right? And here are some ideas. Customers' eyes go to the middle first, then to the right, and then all the way to the left. If you haven't thought about it in this manner, and you've thought about it like I would have traditionally years ago, I would have said, okay, everybody reads left to right. Inaccurate on the way that we want to actually put our menu boards in a position where not only can we sell items, push our throughput through, but also highlight the items that may provide the most margin to our business. So when you think about it, that's one way that we can drive pre-sale menu boards performance is by doing those things. Less than 10 items per screen. Highlight higher margin items and pictures on the left and the right. Because ultimately what you want to do with a study like this, what you want to do is you go through and mystery shop your own brands, and as you mystery shop your operators, you want to go through and try to figure out, how do I actually increase throughput? How do I ask the right questions so that I can get the right answers? Don't just ask the questions we always did in the old days. Be forward-looking. Start to think about how your consumers are changing and how you can best serve them based upon the way that other industries have already started to use some of the tools that we may not use in the QSR industry. So that's, from my perspective, that's the high level, what's going on, how the QSR drive-thru study shook out. So I'll kick this thing back over to Greg.
All right, Ken, that was some really excellent analysis. We appreciate you sharing that with us and look forward to hearing more from you when we get to the audience Q&A. Speaking of, I just want to remind our audience members, and we do have a good crowd today, go ahead and get those questions in so we have them in queue when we hit the audience Q&A portion at the end of the program. So now I'm going to introduce Sam Oches, who's the editor of QSR Magazine and also editorial director at Food News Media. Sam, in his role, has reported extensively on the drive-thru business over the years, and he's here today to share with us his perspectives on what he's heard. Sam, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, Sam, I know from internal discussions that you've been talking a lot about the concept of off-premises, including the proper spelling of that. Can you elaborate a little bit on off-premises and what are the implications of that as a larger topic for drive-thru?
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody who knows me knows this is a hill I'll die on, but everybody spells off-premises wrong. There is an S at the end, neither here nor there, but I'll leave that right there. Yeah, so off-premises is really sort of one of the biggest buzzwords going on right now in the QSR industry. And it's for good reason, of course. You know, what we're seeing is with delivery and with takeout, both of these being driven by mobile order ahead and mobile apps. These have become experiences that many consumers want out of the restaurants that they frequent. So suddenly off-premises has become really one of the most important strategies, I think, for not just QSR, but for the entire restaurant industry. And so I think that has implications for the drive-thru is that, drive-thru is sort of the OG of off-premises, right? This is something that for 50, 60 years, restaurants have been, sending their food off-premises via the drive-thru. And I think that's a really good thing for the QSR space today, that now that many consumers, especially millennials, are looking to consume their food outside the four walls of the restaurant, suddenly the drive-thru is a little bit more appealing to them, I would say. I've been reporting on the drive-thru study now, I think, for 9 years, and I remember back in the first couple of years, it was back when we were kind of coming out of the recession, and fast casual was really starting to take off, and I just remember drive-thru was almost like a dirty word to many people in the industry because they thought, oh, millennials don't want drive-thru. They want to come in, sit down, stay a while, have that good quality. I remember Chipotle in particular, would sort of famously say, oh, but that's fast food. And so now it's kind of funny because Chipotle is actually starting to open locations now with drive-thrus because I think they've realized, oh wait, this is sort of the direction that we're going. We're going back to this time where consumers want to eat outside the four walls, and drive-thru fits in so perfectly with that. So as operators talk about off-premises, I think drive-thru should be a part of that conversation. I don't think, technicalities, I don't think people necessarily include it, but it should be because, when you think about having a make line ready for the drive-thru, you think about staffing, you think about packaging, all of those things, QSR brands are really well equipped to handle that already because of the drive-thru. So off-premises suddenly becomes, very much, the drive-thru very much becomes a part of the off-premises conversation.
Okay, Sam, next question I want to ask you, and we have actually had some audience members bring this up as well, is this is always a question with drive-thru, it seems, technology. It's a big consideration for the drive-thru. Would you agree with that? And what are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology is really going to be the name of the game from now on. But I think it's important to clarify that some of the technology that's most important to drive-thru and moving forward that operators should look at is not necessarily the sexiest technology. So, there's a lot of things that, people want to talk about with technology, certainly mobile being one of them, and we can get to that. But, as I talk to operators, I think, they'll really bring it back to things like, do you have a good digital menu board? Do you have wireless headsets? Do you have a really strong speaker? Of course, these are sort of things that customers don't really think about. This is not necessarily flashy technology, but they're critical to drive-thru success. And so, I think of some folks that I spoke with as part of this year's study, they're talking about how, one of the biggest pain points is at the point of order for the drive-thru. And how do you make that point faster, especially if it's in the middle of your rush hour, if you've got a lot of cars on the lot, you're trying to get them through, one of the ways that you can do that and relieve the pressure at the order point is through better technology. If you have better digital menu boards to, help the customer through their purchasing decision, if you have a very clear speaker, if you have order confirmation board, and even in the back of the house on the employee side, what they're working with, the tools at their disposal, the POS, maybe it's, maybe a tablet out on the lot. These are all things you really have to consider because that technology improves every year. There's a lot of really great technology out there to make the drive-thru system very efficient, and that can be very useful when it comes to leveraging technology to improve the drive-thru, especially when it comes to speed of service. And if we're going to have busier lots, if we're going to have more cars on property, if you can't, expand your property, add another drive-thru lane or things like that, look to the technology and the efficiencies with that to really improve this area.
Okay, in case you're just joining us, we're talking with Sam Oches, editor of QSR Magazine, about some of the best practices he's heard from drive-thru operators. So, Sam, the next question I want to ask is about mobile, a subset of technology, but it's a word that's on a lot of operator minds, has been for a while. We've been told it's the coming thing. Where do we see that and how it stands with the drive-thru business these days?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like I said, I've been doing this several years now, and it was probably somewhere like 6 or 7 years ago that operators started talking about mobile ordering and its implications in the drive-thru. And it was always kind of this thing in the future that everybody was looking to, that everybody was sure that someday mobile ordering would change the drive-thru forever. And we talked about it year after year. Every year I call these same folks and they're saying, yeah, mobile ordering, it's what we're looking at. So it's funny because this year, this is really the first time that now we've started to see mobile ordering actually be implemented at the drive-thru. So most famously, I think we sort of touched on it last year, but Dunkin' Donuts, Dunkin', they launched a new prototype with a mobile order only lane. And so that was sort of this wow, shiny thing that we were all looking at. And then Chipotle, like I said, they started rolling out some drive-thrus, and they were only for mobile orders. And this was really interesting because this was sort of the first, high-profile cases of the major QSR brands sort of going down that path of implementing mobile ordering in the drive-thru. And of course, mobile ordering is really becoming very much a critical component for restaurant brands for that off-premises purpose, that when it comes to mobile order ahead for takeout or when it comes to mobile ordering for delivery, this is how especially millennials, but really all consumers, are experiencing your restaurant brand. And so you really sort of have to have that. But it's not really taken off at a mass level in the drive-thru, and I think Ken sort of alluded to that in some of the data from SeeLevel, is that, a couple of brands are really promoting mobile, but this is not really taken off yet at a large scale in QSR. Now, so what does that mean for this year? I can tell you that all of that buildup that people have been talking about mobile ordering as the future, now we're not so sure. When it comes to the drive-thru, mobile ordering is a little complicated, and multiple operators sort of pointed this out to me, that logistically, mobile ordering, it requires a lot of it just requires a system that is not exactly efficient yet, and it certainly asks a lot of the customer that might throw off sort of the time and accuracy pieces of things. So, for example, if you offer mobile ordering for your drive-through lane, but let's say somebody pulls into that drive-through lane and they forget to order until right as they're pulling into the lane. Okay, well now all of a sudden, what's going to be, 5 minutes till their order is ready. Are you prepared to, direct their car to another space? Or let's say somebody calls in or orders via mobile, 20 minutes in advance, doesn't show up for 20 minutes, and their food's been sitting there cold, and they get their food and they're mad at you because their food is cold. There are all these things that are really kind of hard to predict when it comes to mobile ordering, and again, it sort of asks a lot of the consumer that they have to, place their order at sort of the perfect time and pull into the lot at that right time. And when it comes to doing something like a mobile order only lane, that's great, but that assumes you have the room for it. I mean, that's a big ask for real estate, that you would have all this space for a whole other lane for mobile order. And from what I've heard anecdotally from some folks, those lanes are often empty. So if you have one lane that's backed up to the road that is not mobile order, and you have another mobile order only lane that is empty, but it's just for mobile orders, is that really the best use of your real estate? So these are things that a lot of them are thinking through now. I don't think that means that this is the end of the mobile ordering question for drive-thru. I think we're going to figure this out down the road, but it's still something that is very logistically challenging, and again, it requires sort of a lot on behalf of the consumer. So I think we're going to have to still see where the operators take this, and I'll be interested to see how they work on that and make this something that is pretty fluid and efficient.
Sam, a favorite question in this program each year is always about the future. So we ask you to look into your crystal ball. What do you think the future of drive-thru might look like? And if I could prompt you a little bit too, is artificial intelligence a part of that picture?
Absolutely, yeah. So that sort of took me caught me off guard this year, which is that mobile ordering was always that thing that was sort of that future thing we always talked about, and then all of a sudden this year everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, and I think with good reason. Certainly the technology available today for artificial intelligence is affordable, and it's very accurate, and it can lead to some pretty interesting, I think, results for the QSR space. So what that looks like in the drive-thru is at a very base level, very simply, and I think what you'll see at a lot of QSRs in the next couple of years is if you're a customer, you drive onto the lot, you pull into the drive-thru lane, and you get to the order station, and a robotic voice, an AI bot says, "Hello, welcome to brand X. What would you like to order?" And then you go through the ordering process with this AI, with this machine, and it takes your order, and again, with the technology sort of where it's at today, it's probably going to be more accurate than a person, because there's so much human error that can go into that ordering process. So then you pull up, and a person will kind of hand out your food, and you're on your way. So that, at a very base level, again, I think is what you're going to start seeing probably out there in the industry in the next few years, is that AI will be responsible for at least taking your order. Now, you get into some other a little bit more complicated, and if you ask me, a little bit more big brothery implications, but, some have suggested that maybe in the future you can pull onto the lot and there will be cameras that scan either your car, your license plate, or your face and say, oh, hey, last time you were here, you ordered the cheeseburger. Would you like the cheeseburger again? That is something that could possibly be a factor down the road for artificial intelligence. I don't know. I think that's sort of a lot to ask, a lot for consumers to have to give up in terms of privacy. But these are the things people are talking about, is how do you employ artificial intelligence in your QSR operation, and specifically in the drive-thru, to keep things moving along quickly, and again, how do you use that to really improve the order accuracy and the potential of that. I think there will also be some implications with robotics. As robotics get better, that has huge implications on labor. So when you talk about AI and robotics being worked into the QSR operation, these are things that could make it so that you can run a full-scale drive-through operation with just a handful of people. So I think operators are going to have to really look at what's available today, and they're going to have to follow it as we move into the future. One of the things about, if you're one of the leading innovators in something, if you're an innovator in drive-through and you do something like, for example, what Dunkin' did with mobile order only, is you get the headlines and you get the attention, but you also have to be the sort of the guinea pig. You have to be the one who figures out, okay, well, what does this mean now for speed? What does it mean for accuracy? And so right now I think a lot of the QSR brands are probably sitting back and watching how this goes, but eventually they're going to have to start jumping into some of these new technologies available and just sort of see how they go.
All right, final question for Sam Oches, editor of QSR Magazine. All this talk of technology, Sam, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about good old-fashioned customer service. Does it even matter anymore?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes, but what's interesting, I think, is that I really think this is sort of on a brand-by-brand basis. What some folks have sort of alluded to me in my reporting was the customer service piece of this might just be one of those things that's a differentiator for some of the brands. A couple that have frequently been called out are Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out Burger. Now, these are two massively successful companies, and as we saw in Ken's data, I mean, Chick-fil-A, they just rule at this operation, and I think a huge part of that is the customer service piece. They have really made that a differentiating factor of their business that extends to the drive-thru. And I'll tell you just anecdotally, I have sat in a Chick-fil-A drive-thru for like 15 minutes at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. I'm in the South, so it's a little bit of a bias, but it is real. People love that place, and it is because they are so doggone good at their customer service. Yes, they have a good menu and other things as well, but their customer service really sets them apart. I think a lot of what draws people back to them. And so I think that becomes their differentiator. And it's the same for In-N-Out Burger. I mean, if you talk to Californians, In-N-Out Burger is, that's sacrosanct. That's something that is just a part of their livelihood. And it's, yes, partly because of the menu, but it's also because they have really made customer service and welcoming the customers and making customers feel truly important. They've made that an important part of their business. Now, this is not to say that the other brands haven't. This, of course, extends to really all of the brands in our study and others. But I think that, some brands may not necessarily place the emphasis on customer service as they might on things like order accuracy, on speed of service, because I think it is still safe to say if you get the customer on and off the lot in a good amount of time with the accurate order and it's tasty food, they're going to be happy. And so whether or not they got good customer service, it's not to say that doesn't matter, but it is just to say that maybe if one brand is not known for that customer service, and they can at least make the customer happy with a quick, successful purchase, then that's going to be okay. And I think especially when you bring in AI and robotics and you take some of maybe the labor component out of this, that has huge implications for customer service, of course. And so AI is probably not going to be the answer for Chick-fil-A, right? Because they're built around their human business. But it could be the answer for some of these other brands. So yeah, customer service, I think, is going to always have a role, but it might not be the most important role for all of the brands.
Sam, thanks for joining us today. We'll look forward to hearing more from you as well when we get to audience Q&A, which is, in fact, now. To the audience, please get your questions in. We have quite a few already. We're going to get to as many as we possibly can in the next few minutes. Ken Lundin, I want to start with you. This is actually a question from me that I kind of wonder about. So over the many years that I've been involved in looking at this study, speed of service has been the number one thing we looked at. And a big part of that, from my perspective, was that no matter what else you had to say about the drive-through business, how many people you can put through the line is directly related to how much money you're going to make. Is that just an outmoded point of view at this point? Will speed of service ever be king again?
That's a deep question. It probably goes well beyond the amount of time that we have. I think ultimately what you have seen is you've certainly seen brands show that speed of service is not the most important thing. Particularly just look at how the success that Chick-fil-A has had and many of the other brands who are not simply the fastest. I think what you're finding, if you were to choose to say the customer loyalty, frequency, if those types of things, if we take it on a one-off and say it's how many people I can put through on a Saturday, well, yeah, that's directly related to revenue on Saturday. If we take it back and we say, well, it's how many people can I put through times, how many times they actually visit me on a monthly basis, because of their brand loyalty, because of the expectations that I'm meeting, that's a completely different metric, and it could be exponentially different. And so I think what you're really starting to find, and something that we test for with many brands that we work with, is how do we actually market to our customers so we tell them what's important for them. As an example, I like to use just because I've gone through their drive-through, like, Steak and Shake is an example. For those of you who have Steak and Shake in your area, they point the customer's eyes to the idea that it may take a little longer in their drive-through, but it's hotter and fresher, right? It's kind of their idea within it. And I think there are marketing messages that if I point my customer's eyes to the things that I do really well, I think I can increase brand loyalty. Throughput certainly matters. But I think personally I'm more interested in how many customers can I have that will come back more frequently than how many customers can I put through on just one given Saturday.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Before we go any further with the audience Q&A, let me just address a few things that a lot of people are asking. First of all, the slides from the program will be made available or are available as a download, and the presentation is going to be available as a recording. I'll mention more about that at the end of the program, but you will be receiving an email when the recording is available. Finally, quite a few of you are asking what we might consider to be very granular questions about study data. That's really not what we're looking to get into today as part of this program, although we will try to follow up with you as best as possible after the program to address your questions about that. So having said that, Sam, I'm going to address this one to you. In recent studies, we've kind of looked at, and you've mentioned Chipotle in particular, fast casual getting involved in drive-through. What's the latest on drive-through in the fast casual space?
I think a lot more fast casual brands are really looking at this as good potential for future business. I mean, like I said, Chipotle swore off drive-through for a long time, and now they are seeing this as potentially a good opportunity moving forward. Now, Chipotle, of course, has gone through some fairly big transitions in the last couple of years, but they're not alone. I know Corner Bakery just announced that they're going to do a drive-through operation. Panera has had some success with drive-through. I think they continue to open more drive-throughs, and there are other examples out there. And I say, why not? Like I said, back in 2010, 2011, maybe drive-through was a little bit more of a dirty word, and maybe it implied lesser quality. But really, I don't think it does anymore. I think now, customers have really grown to get to this point where, yes, quality matters as much as it did 8 or 9 years ago, but I think convenience is really kind of is become very much top priority, where, it matters how they get their food, how quickly they can get it, how accessible it is to them. And drive-through is such a great tool for accessibility. So fast casuals really need to think that through, because, if it fits for them in terms of if they can find the right real estate, if if they can and find a way to adapt their operation to the drive-thru, I think it could be very, very, very strong. So another piece to that too is when you consider the millennial generation, and you consider that millennials really grew up with fast casual, right? They were the first generation where Panera and Chipotle were a little bit more, sort of a regular visit than generations previous to them. And what I think it matters about millennials is I think you're seeing a lot more of them start to follow their parents to the suburbs. They might be moving out of the urban areas and into houses. And why that is relevant is that, all of a sudden, they're driving a lot more. They're certainly changing their purchasing decisions, and that's probably going to have implications for the drive-thru. So millennials are going to take their desire for higher quality fast casual food, and they're probably going to take it to the suburbs where they're going to look for drive-thrus. So that's just something to consider for fast casual businesses that are looking for a new avenue for business.
Okay, Ken Lundin from SeeLevel HX, I want to direct this to you because it's from your presentation. You talked about better throughput coming along with suggestive selling, but the idea of better throughput with suggestive selling seems somewhat counterintuitive. How do you explain that?
I think probably the easiest one is I can just tell you how I sat. I sat in a QSR drive-thru a week ago, and I could figure out the first 70% of my order and couldn't figure out the last 30%. So, just with our innate knowledge of what customers buy when they come to us, the idea of suggestive selling, the 1, 2, 3 items, which also adds to margin and so forth, can also decrease total time because it'll redirect as just in the personal example, it'll redirect the buyer's eye, the buyer's mind, into the idea of what it is that they want. It helps conclude it. It helps guide the buyer. We look at this across a lot of industries. But that idea of helping direct them to what could potentially be the most natural fit to what they've already ordered allows you to go faster.
So Ken, let's stick with you on this one, also from something you talked about earlier. When you were talking about menu boards and showing where customers' eyes gravitate, how did we come to the conclusions, or where does the information come from for you as to where the customer's eyes do gravitate on the menu board?
Yeah, what we've certainly have consulting partners that are fantastic at menu board optimization, and we've done that through research instead of just a few assumptions here and there. And that's something I can certainly provide the specifics on that as we answer and send people information after the presentation.
Okay. We really just have a couple minutes left, so I think I'm going to, and I apologize to anyone whose question we were not able to get to. We will certainly try to follow up offline. Let's go back to a little bit of a crystal ball question. Given what we've seen in the last few years of the study, I'd like to ask the two of you just to maybe speculate a little bit on what we might expect to see from the study in 2019 and beyond, or just from drive-thru in particular, or in general. Ken, would you like to take that?
I'm sure I can start with that. Yeah, I think there's a few things. So first of all, let me say the following. We are interested in the input of the people that are on this call, this webinar today. We absolutely, and I think Sam, you and Greg would both echo this. We don't like to create this in a vacuum. And I think 2019 is going to be a pivotal year for the study as we begin to transition into the more kind of the newer stuff that's going on. I think AI is still kind of bleeding edge as opposed to leading edge, so I don't expect to see a lot of that. I think we'll see some additional things around the idea of using mobile app. I think we'll see food on demand, food delivery type services come into that. And I think one of the things that we will absolutely be tasked with is how to use a specific set of real estate to increase the total optimization of what we can push through our restaurants. So I think what we're really looking forward in 2019, and I know that I'm not answering this question specifically, Greg, but we really are looking for the input from operators, from brands. What are you trying to accomplish? What are the business problems that you're trying to tackle? Because we have some good data from this study this year that show us that there are certainly some things that are starting to trend significantly, and that the way that you view a successful QSR may be different in 2019 than it was just in 2015. So from that perspective, yeah, I would think mobile ordering will be something. I think food on demand will be a challenge. I think that we'll start to hear stuff internally about the operational challenges associated with good business coming from the use of additional technologies. And then I don't want to walk past what Sam said earlier. in the study results, we were also able to see there is increased throughput with better technology, being speakers, headsets, those types of things as well. Yet there seems to be a lack of investment in some of those things, which would actually help a QSR be successful.
Yeah, that's a point well taken, Ken, regarding input on the study, and I hope our audience will take that to heart. That really is how the study gets at the heart of understanding what the needs of the quick service audience are. So please do let us know what you would like to see from the study in the future. Sam, I'm going to ask you for the last word. Any parting thoughts on what you think we might see from the study or from drive-thru in the coming year or so?
Well, I think as far as the study goes, it's pretty rare that some of these data points surprise me, which is not to say that there's not a lot of movement, because I think you do see some general trends in the numbers. But, it's a lot of the numbers that we see are line up with, I guess, what we've seen in the last couple of years. Maybe one point that surprised me this year was sort of Wendy's slowing way down, because that was pretty off trend with what Wendy's has been accomplishing over the last 20 years. So that's to say, in the coming years with the data, I think you can expect to see, probably speed isn't going to speed up significantly, but maybe other things like accuracy will improve. Maybe some of the other numbers will get better as some of the technologies are implemented in the drive-thru. But as a whole, yeah, I think innovation is what I'm really most interested to see in the next several years. Certainly AI and robotics. One thing I didn't even mention that I think will have probably an effect on the drive-thru is self-driving cars. We're probably 10, 20 years out from that becoming fairly regular, but they will have an effect, I think, on the drive-thru. And when you add that to AI and robotics, all those things will start to really significantly change the operation. And so, I think those innovations are what we're looking forward to seeing. And certainly, if anybody out there is doing something pretty crazy or unique, we would love to hear about it, because we would love to be able to see how that has a significant effect on the drive-thru.
Okay, Ken Lundin from SeeLevel HX, Sam Oches from QSR Magazine, thank you so much for joining us today to share your considerable expertise on the drive-thru business, and thanks also, of course, to our audience for attending. As I mentioned before, a recording of the webinar will be available. You will receive an email when that is available for listening. Should be sometime tomorrow. Thanks again for joining us, and everyone have a great day.